Fokusirajući se na izuzetno aktualnu temu digitalnih blizanaca, već smo spomenuli nekoliko puta, ali sada posebice na inicijativu Europske komisije pod nazivom Destination Earth. Ova inicijativa ima za cilj razviti visoko precizan digitalni model zemlje na globalnoj razini, omogućujući praćenje, simulaciju i predviđanje interakcija između prirodnih fenomena i ljudskih aktivnosti. Dakle, ovim konceptom se simuliraju ekstremni vremenski događaji uz pomoć vrhunskih europskih superračunala. Srcu kao koordinatoru Hrvatskog centra kompetencija za HPC su vrlo dobro poznata Euro-HPC-GU superračunala, a mogu biti dostupne i vama, samo nam se javite. No vratimo se na glavnu temu. Ključne komponente inicijative Destination Earth su digitalni blizanci i Digital Twin Engine, a riječ je o inovativnom softverskom okviru koji integrira računalne, podatkovne i aplikacijske slojeve. Prebacit ću se na engleski kako bi nas naš gost, predavač, ipak razumio nešto. Today, we have the honor of hosting Mr. Nils Wedi, who is a digital technology lead for Destination Earth at the European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecast. Mr. Wedi obtained his PhD from Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich, Germany. His 30-year career at the European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecast covers a wide range of technical and scientific aspects of Earth system modeling. Mr. Wedi will present the topic, Implementing Digital Twin Technology for the Earth System within the Destination Earth initiative that I have already briefly described in Croatian. Please give him a warm welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much, also for the organizers, of course, for inviting me. My Croatian, unfortunately, is very limited, so bok I voila, to start off on a lighter note. So I would like to introduce to you our journey over the past few years in initiating this Destination Earth program, which is funded by the European Commission, in particular the Directorate CNECT, that is also closely associated with the EuroHPC consortium that provides for Destination Earth as a strategic initiative the computing resources that we use in order to build the digital twins and run the twins on these EuroHPC systems. And it is for the first time that we work together with 3 European organizations to combine, if you like, the expertise of ECMWF with respect to its heritage and knowledge on Earth system modeling and numerical weather prediction, with ESA, its knowledge and heritage, of course, on Earth observations and spaceborne satellite measurements and missions, and of course EUMETSAT are closely associated with its knowledge on operating these satellite systems and also launching these systems and operational procedures and data handling. And so let me take you a little bit on a journey with respect to the challenges that also arise here with respect to these supercomputing systems, because they were all brand new when we started Destination Earth. Also the EuroHPC machines came just online and not actually all at the same time. And of course all of these systems are based on different technologies. So Destination Earth is about bespoke simulation capabilities and digital twins for weather-induced extremes and climate. In future phases, we also consider, as I've seen the earlier presentation, extremes with respect to geophysical phenomena such as earthquakes. So this is a future planning, but in the first phases we concentrated on weather-induced extremes and climate, and extremes, of course, that we may expect in future climates. The systems we have been using is LUMI, Mare Nostrum 5, Leonardo, and Meluxina in Luxembourg for these systems. The idea is to enable bespoke cutting-edge simulation capabilities in a distributed computing environment, because as you know, the EuroHPC platforms are placed in different countries. Provide Earth system information at scale, where the impacts of extreme events and climate change are felt. So trying to build connections both from the simulation capabilities as well all the way down to data provision and effectively providing information at city scale. And then, of course, the technical aspects of this undertaking, the adaptation and effective use of your HPC resources, the new end-to-end pathways of interacting with digital twin data as we face very high-resolution simulations, production rates of, say, 1 petabyte per day. And of course, it changes and challenges paradigms of storing data like we did in the past forever on tape, versus having streamed data information and digest the information as it passes through the networks. And then, of course, finally, an innovative and thriving AI-enabled digital ecosystem, because machine learning, as you're all aware, is a major disruptive component in building basically these systems, and they of course provide also wonderful opportunities in various aspects of building digital twins, be it in the way we distribute data in the future, or be it in the way we communicate information about climate to end users, and how we even prepare information for policy use and other aspects. So let me go into more detail. What we coin a digital twin engine is really part of ECMW's wider software engine to operate complex Earth system simulations, to operate some of these AI interfaces, but also to, of course, deal with this digital twin data. There is the adaptation to the hybrid architectures that I will talk more in detail, end-to-end workflows to produce these high-resolution simulations, novel data handling capabilities, and finally, of course, machine learning training and inference pipelines. So, of course, all of this is intimately, from our perspective, from my personal perspective, connected with numerical weather prediction, which we call the quiet numerical weather prediction NWP revolution over the years. What you see here is evolution of scores in terms of like the performance or quality of forecasts in the medium range over the years and over the time. The two lines are essentially the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere prediction. So you could see in earlier days when we started in 1979, so exactly 50 years, we celebrate this year ECMWF's inception of doing medium-range forecasts at a time when many member states and even experts in the field said, you don't need such a center. It's impossible to do medium-range weather forecasting. And so we issued, nevertheless, in 1979, a forecast. And you can see how nobody is laughing about this initiative anymore. Because, in fact, nowadays, with the machine learning coming in front and in the forefront of visibility, the jargon now is, it's done. The problem is solved. So this is how far we have come, really, over the 50 years. And you can see, you know, even the gap between the southern prediction of a forecast in the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere is pretty much the same these days. You know, the quality anywhere on Earth is remarkably similar. It has become remarkably more similar. Of course, there will be more details, and I will say more about this. But the digital revolution is the next step, of course, that we have been building supercomputers with sort of a big gap between peak performance on the one side and then the sustained performance on the other side. Like, what do our applications really get out of these supercomputing platforms? But at the same time, we have been pushing, and there's been a demand of pushing the resolution. As I mentioned before, like city scales require, of course, information of what is outside, but the city scale is at meters. Atmospheric composition, the emissions that we expose into the atmosphere are at meter or kilometer scale, but the weather patterns are at thousands of kilometers, so we need to stretch across all of these scales. So there has been a continuous push in numerical weather prediction for more and more and more resolution, and especially now with digital twins, where you want to tightly connect the weather information, other information, human science information, people movement information, to target particular impact sectors on target particular policy. So this requires this range of resolution. And of course, trying to get more and more out of the computers in terms of pushing the sustained performance. And one aspect, of course, that I mentioned and can't mention enough, if you like, is machine learning and machine learning revolution, which is what is happening right now, and is happening at an exceptionally fast pace. And therefore, we need to be ready for this as well. And it will clearly, especially in numerical weather prediction, but also in other areas, fundamentally change the way we conduct business today and in the future. So part of this is, of course, the investment in Europe, in Euro HPC, 8 billion plus, probably more these days. The slide is slightly old. Towards exascale. These are the first platforms that were established and that we are using in Destination Earth. So it's Lumi in Finland. You see the two numbers are like the higher number is the peak performance and the other one is the sustained performance on, of course, a given test. This is not the application performance of our application. You have Leonardo in Italy and you have Mare Nostrum 5. They are all online. We are using all three of these actively. There is also Jupiter coming along, actually quite close to where I work now in Bonn. And we will have Alice Recoq in 26, 27 coming online as well as the two first exascale supercomputers in Europe. And of course, there is a number of other smaller installations like Meluxina in Luxembourg, in Slovenia, Portugal, the Czech Republic, Bulgaria have Euro HPC installations. And of course, the EU Council has adopted in the regulation the use of AI in development. So a number of these sites have additional AI factory installations that are to facilitate further this revolution of AI into the future. And we are arguably actually, with Destination Earth, have inspired, in fact, this idea about these AI factories because it is intimately the same type of problem of producing, if you like, the information on the supercomputer and making this information available through cloud systems, through platforms to the user. And it's about this sort of software usability and easy access that these AI factories are promising as well. So it is a software inspired infrastructure. It is not just the hardware, it is a lot about the software as well. So let me quickly then go through the different challenges. One is, of course, the adaptation and effective use of these Euro HPC resources. So as I mentioned before, we have been on this journey of the improvements of the scores, improvements of like our simulation capabilities, the peak and sustained performance. But there are many other aspects like time and energy to solution, the spatial resolution we want to push, the code portability. And let me put it up front. It is much more difficult to port a physical Earth system model to Euro HPC computers than it is to port an AI model. It is a huge difference. And even though AI models also face different types of problems on the different architectures, like AMD GPUs is different to NVIDIA GPUs, for example, and the software stack that goes with them is also different. But nevertheless, physical models with their variety of algorithms have a harder time. And that, of course, is one of the successes of machine learning as well, that the software tooling that is available there is easy to use. To do a forecast with an AI model is simply module load AI model and then run AI model, and 1 minute later on your GPU, you have your 10-day forecast. It is as simple as that. Whereas a physical model, you have initialization, you have like data simulation procedures, you run a forecast, it takes at least 1 hour on many nodes on the supercomputer. It's quite a different beast. But nevertheless, we believe it's still useful to do so. But we are facing, of course, the challenges of these different frameworks, like from the machine learning, the TensorFlow, Keras, PyTorch in AIFS, which is the forecast at ECMWF to do machine learning. We use mostly the PyTorch aspects. But also you have these different kind of platform, specific computing architectures that are coming out, a whole zoo, if you like, that you need to adapt to. And of course, if you want to optimally use it, you have to adapt your algorithms to these platforms. So one, of course, as a user, you might say, why can't compiler just do this for us? So this is a study we did where we looked at these different AMD, A100, H100, and so on to see just for one particular algorithm how well we are performing on these different systems. And it's clear that the compilers typically are not able to give us a performance out of the box, but there are a lot of other things have to happen in order to make this adaptation happen. So NVIDIA, for example, offers, of course, Fortran, Python frameworks, C++. They offer OpenACC and OpenMP, and also, like, however, if you want to get like really the peak performance out of the GPUs, you do need to involve CUDA kernels, NVIDIA CUDA, maybe linking with CUDA Fortran in order to actually get your sort of legacy NWP models and climate models working on these platforms efficiently. In fact, what we find is that OpenACC, which was already sort of called dead as an approach was actually the most, well, the least divergent approach across the different platforms in order to be able to run on Leonardo, on Mare Nostrum 5, and on Lumi across the different GPUs with the same kind of code. And the code here in our aspect is like two different Earth system models based on IFS, the integrated forecasting system, and ECMWF, and ICON, the DWD developed forecasting system that is also one of the climate models in Destination Earth. There's also a little note there. Let's not, talk too much about it, but I think it's one important point, I guess, of this note that you can read in your own time is that a little preload, if you like, on the setup of the compiler can make, by mistake, if you like, I mean, not our mistake, but the vendor's mistake, can lead to a 10 to 15% performance change. So you really have to focus on every little detail in order to get the best performance out of these platforms. Another big aspect, of course, is that you need to be able to sort of configure your code into components and modularize as much as possible. In our case here, it's just an example where we have a model that is represented partly in spectral space and partly in grid point space. So there are transformations, spectral transforms done every time step. So this is a huge, important part of the computations and part of the success, in fact, of the physical model. And I'll tell you in a minute why. But there's also, of course, radiation. There is a wave model. There's a land surface model. There is an ocean. There is the whole infrastructure that handles the fields and the data so that you can seamlessly access information across these different components of the Earth system. So this is, and in particular, of course, if you want to have these resident either on the CPU part of a hybrid chip or on the GPU part of the chip. And at the moment, of course, these have different memory aspects unless you're running on a particular NVIDIA platform. And therefore, you need to consider the transfer of information from one part of the chip to another part of the chip, which comes, of course, with corresponding energy cost, corresponding kind of time and latency. And so we are using also tools that do source-to-source translation in order to transform our underlying data structures into the most important, if you like, ordering for that particular platform. So if you want to run on CPU, it's different to, for example, if you run on GPU. And we use these sort of tools to transform. One important aspect is perhaps our advantage in Earth system modeling, that many of the physical processes still happen in columns. So they happen in the vertical. So you have obviously the wind, horizontal advection, transporting information, but many of the physical processes that are fast happen still much faster in the vertical column than they happen in the horizontal. So therefore we can separate the two aspects. But one important point I wanted to particularly stress is the GEM power. Now, GEM is the shortcut or well-known shortcut for matrix multiplication routines. And so here in this particular aspect of the physical model, the IFS, this is really a key hard computing component of that physical model. You see the Fourier coefficients along each of the latitudes of a globe in the matrix on the left. And also, and that equals the associated Legendre polynomials, which is a fixed pre-computed matrix for all time steps. You can do it once, store it on the GPU, and then just apply every time step, because you time step forward in time in a physical model. And that is just an associated Legendre polynomial. It's a whole zoo of polynomials, of course, that are also indexed by each of those latitudes. And then you have, on the other hand, because these are the Gaussian latitude nodes, if you like, of the forecast model. And then that's get multiplied with the matrix of the spherical harmonics coefficients in wave number space M and N. And that sort of constitutes really this matrix multiply problem in our physical model. And in short, there is also then the MPI parallelism, so parallelism across different kind of GPU nodes of vulnerable wave numbers and levels or fields, because in spectral space they're all independent, so therefore you can distribute them wherever you like. So this is the kind of parallelism that we expose in the physical model. But the most important point is this is a matrix multiply. And anything you can translate, any problem you might have, if you can translate it into a matrix multiply, you win. This has been the fundamental key cornerstone of accelerating and using supercomputers in both CPU as well as GPU. And it continues with AI. Now, the AI-based forecast, the AIFS in our case, we were not very inventive on the name, but it is really the same. So if you look actually up in the setup, a linear transformation in a fully connected layer, as an example, the same E, the same output result, is basically the corresponding input activation A. This is the matrix A. Matrix multiplied with the B, the weights. And then, of course, they have also a bias. This is inherent to the neural network in the machine learning. But it's just an addition, if you like, of an additional matrix. And that constitutes the fundamental underlying deep learning network approach. And that's why they win. That's why they are so fast, because they employ the very same fast matrix multiplication in the underlying processes. And that's why the NVIDIA software stack is so good, because they obviously have highly optimized CUDA routines that fit their platform perfectly in order to accelerate these type of multiplications. And they are nicely wrapped up these days in Python frameworks that you can easily use, load, and sort of apply in your environment. Now, when we talk to vendors, we also exchange a lot of information with them. We're using this sort of idea of weather and climate dwarfs. So therefore, vendors typically don't want to look at the huge Earth system model and kind of like interact with you. But if you give them just a little parcel, here's my transform, runs on its own, little test case, little verification, that's when they engage, and they come back with accelerations that you can then build back into your complex Earth system model. But of course, there's a step further, like this DSL toolchain. The idea of, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, and of course in AIFS training, so like when you look at the machine learning, you also have two levels of parallelism, because now it's not only the acceleration of the gem that I mentioned before, like the algorithm itself, but of course you have the data parallelism as well, because you don't need to train on all data at the same time, and of course you have all the repeated epochs of machine learning. So therefore, you have a parallelism, another level of parallelism that you don't actually necessarily have in physical Earth system modeling, because unfortunately all the waves are connected with each other. We typically require implicit solvers that connect everybody with everybody else. So we have kind of slowing down parts in physical models that need to reconnect the global effect and the local effects, because they are not independent. However, the data sources are. So I come back to this sort of tool chains, and the idea basically that you on the left-hand side, you see the classical approach of developing models, where you go to your numerical model, you do a proof of concept, maybe in a MATLAB, then you code it into a single CPU core on C, C++, and Fortran. These days it's hard to find people that actually still want to do Fortran, so therefore we actually, only from this point of view, probably need to change all our code into Python so that we actually even find people that want to work with us. And so like, this is sort of the classical approach. But then you take a lot of time to parallelize, to put paradigms in the code and so on. It becomes all a bit unwieldy and difficult to see. So the question is, can we move over to the right model, where right from the beginning, we are defining a more high-level concept, a domain-specific language that allows us to describe essentially what we want to do in our brain, in our physical space as a scientist, and then just leave maybe, okay, it means investment in making this transfer to the computer scientist who can really like build, if you like, paradigms. It means sort of investment in the interfaces of talking to each other in an algorithmic way in order to translate the physical science into the other separation of concern. So it's not for free, but it does offer a more maintainable code base that is not all jumbled up and difficult to maintain, and ultimately actually has led in the past to, let's remove it all and start again. So, so one of these examples is like what they do in Switzerland, also in collaboration with us, where we have a Python front end and then sort of a framework that allows you to do back-end translations onto CPU or GPU. And so this is also some of the developments that we do in Destination Earth on building regional modeling based on this PMAP FEM approach, using these tool chains to have performant physical model code at very high resolution on GPUs. Of course, there is more. I mean, there is also understanding the energy cost of simulations. So there is this hierarchical power diagram of what costs what when you transfer information on chip. And of course, you know, if you believe in particular Thorsten Höffler and his group, understanding data movement is key to performance and portability. And they have another level, DAIS, they call it, which is these data flow multigraphs, an understanding of how the data flows through your system and squeezing out further optimization, if you like, out of your code by using these kind of frameworks. But it's also not free, and you know, when you talk to the people working with this, they took also quite some time to redesign and make it actually happen, but the performance they achieve is remarkably good. So all of these are examples, if you like, of adaptation and trying to squeeze out more performance. And you know, given the lack of time, this is just a summary of essentially what I said before. But it's certainly on EuroHPC, we still find quite diversity on software stacks, because there's also a middleware layer. There's also other aspects that rely on the libfabric type libraries to do MPI communication. And unfortunately, they're not always the same. And therefore, really at the moment, installation of Earth system physical models on UHPC platforms is a new adventure for every new machine. And I think we can improve on that. So challenge 2, quickly, end-to-end pathways. This is about data. So we want to bring this data away from these high-performance computers. The classical model at EuroHPC is this is a research machine. You come and do your computation, take your data, and all the best. However, if you produce 1 petabyte per day, this taking away your data suddenly, even if you have a high-performance GAN network, doesn't really work so well. So therefore, in Destination Earth, we created what we call data bridges and a data lake concept that allows to have physical infrastructure installations that we own, that we control, next to these UHPC machines, where we kind of have the data, where we manage the access to the data without having or without users needing access to the EuroHPC, and therefore having this sort of middle way of transferring this information, having services, in fact, established to a nearby cloud system, which then can be used for end users, for these sort of digital twin applications, for those application users that actually want to sort of look at the weather in their city, for example. So this is what the idea is of the data lake, and then of course the core platform, the platform that connects and allows you to give you this information through a web, through a login, again, something we control, and where you have a whole zoo of services that allow you to then deal with your data, but also where you can add your own service, where you can build basically on components that we provide, that the system provides, and you build out of these components your own kind of ecosystem. Or in fact also, given that we have all this digital twin data, one of the big concepts in data is that we transfer, if you like, some responsibility of collecting certain data to the user. So therefore, we don't like say we store everything just in case, but in fact, the applications might need only 2-meter temperature over the 100 most important European cities. This we can easily extract. They don't take much storage, and they can be continuously collected, and we can provide the interfaces for you to collect this data, but it's collected in your space, not in ours. So it's this kind of interfaces that we are building in part of Destination Earth. And that's sort of fundamentally, if you like, the concept of this co-design, of the idea of like working with specific use case examples that bring this together. And of course, 300 plus scientists involved, analysts and HPC experts in this endeavor. Did I forget something? Yeah. A quick one is also, when you go with very high resolution, historically in numerical weather prediction, we deal with latitude, longitude grids. Now, these become very unattractive when you have very high resolution. You know, when you have a latitude, longitude grid, you have the same number of points on each latitude. Now, the size of this latitude near the pole is only a few kilometers, but you still have the same 100,000 points, basically, on this thing. So you get like a resolution of 1 meter, but it's not really a resolution that the model resolves. It's obsolete data, basically. And it's an obsolete wielding around of this information. So therefore, we move to hierarchical grids, like the HealPix grid. And in fact, it's surprising how many software packages these days, even from vendors like NVIDIA and so on, require you to have pixelized information in regular grids. So they are not able to plot irregular data. And this is a real problem because you're throwing around over the network huge amounts of data which nobody ever needs. It's really just what you would write and what really is the resolution of our physical systems is what is represented, if you like, in the Hilbig's grid. An equal area representation. Hilbig is nice because it's hierarchical as well. Hilbig is nice because it still has latitudes. Meteorologists like latitudes, regular things where we can do Fourier transforms. So therefore, you know, we still like that. But it is, as you can see, a distribution that is equal area and no longer this kind of, you know, cluttering of points near the pole. So this is like the overview of the flow, how the information goes through the system. You have like the modeling, there's different components that I don't have time to go much in detail now, but this is a link to the platform. You can start to explore it yourself. It is online, the data is available. Some of these basic services like data notification and Polytope are available there. And of course, being from the meteorological community and operationalizing both weather and climate information, it is important to also bring this compatibility with WIS2 type concepts, the idea of have Pythonic kind of infrastructure that allows you to extract information and also link ultimately this information, of course, with the same Pythonic frameworks that are building the machine learning infrastructure as well. So you can combine the two technically. Here's just an example of this interoperable semantic data access. Of course, if you are dealing or have been dealing with ECMWF in the past, it has been a fundamental concept always in our data archives, which is one of the largest or the largest meteorological data archive in the world. And we have always had a concept of you being able to retrieve temperature over Europe rather than retrieving a file and then, you know, having to sort of deal with the file. But really, it's always been the retrieval of the information of a step, a particular time, a temperature, a meaningful quantity, if you like. That's why I call it semantic access. And we have extended this here in Destination Earth to cover atmosphere, ocean, land surface, all under the same Hilbig's grid, which allows you to extract and compare different models, in this case the ocean, or extract shapes, polygon shapes along country boundaries, city locations from this vast data set, so you can pinpoint, if you like, the access, because we have climate data, more than 100 years of climate data produced now in Destination Earth, hourly data, over 30-year records. Now, you don't want to retrieve all of that and then pick your point, but ideally you can pick a point directly. And so we have introduced mechanisms that jump, if you like, into these particular locations while still preserving storage formats that are conformant and compatible with WMO standards. We also have worked on linking, in particular, pilot project like this Glory with existing networking installations. Like they had the requirement of working on Leonardo. They also have their own computing systems locally in Germany, so they wanted to know how we can connect to these. We try to adapt some of our software to their S3 protocols in order to be able to communicate, if you like, effectively their data with ours. And this pilot project is interesting, I think, generally for sort of national installations that have their own data, of course, and want to fuse their information with what destination produces. So it is feeding, in a way, in the wider European meteorological infrastructure strategy in that, it sort of blueprints some of these sort of ideas in moving this forward. And of course, we're talking a lot with our member states to bring together basically these ideas, provide software and infrastructure that people can use and exploit, and then, work with us on this. So I appreciate I'm short of time. So challenge 3. A bit about these cutting-edge simulations. I mentioned weather-induced and climate twins, so what specific adaptation measures can limit consequences of recent and future events, how will different scenario changes, droughts, and heat waves affect you. And of course, one particular aspect is that in Earth system modeling, we used to think in these axes of resolution, data simulation, complexity of the models, and ensembles for uncertainty quantification. How sure are you that this is going to happen? And so the new one is like impact applications. So basically, how does it scale with all the users that want different products, that want different kind of variables? Wind farms want particularly like 100-meter winds. The time is over that the meteorologists offer you 850 hectopascal temperature, and then what? Because nobody knows what to do with that. However, people do know. If you give me the wind exactly at the height of my wind farm, then that's what I want. and so on. You know, there are many, many examples of this kind. Now, we could produce, of course, all this information for everybody, but this is difficult to scale, so therefore, this axis. This is just one example, because visualizing what we produce and having this sort of augmented reality, I mean, this is really only a snapshot. If you have this on the augmented reality glasses that we have, it's really fascinating. Even for somebody that's 30 years working with meteorological data, you find so many details and colorful things. And of course, the beauty of having a digital twin is you can have it in red, in blue, you can see the Earth in all different colors because you have the full state of the information. Whereas in your observation system of a satellite, you had to pre-select, if you like, your microwave frequency or whatever, whereas we can choose at will. And it's sort of a piece of art, if you like, but it's fascinating and useful, and I think that's where, you know, this exploration of visualizing these effects will also be more in the future. So, just on the cost, of course, it's not for free. We use, for a 30-year scenario, about 1 to 1.5 million GPU hours, or about 34 million CPU core hours, depending on the model, because some models ran on the CPU part of the EuroHPC, some models ran on the GPU part. And, but they are regularly updated, so we anticipate a yearly update, so compared to like the classical CMAP cycles, and you see also the different kind of resolutions that you get out of destination Earth, as opposed to what, if you like, the classical climate models produced today from CMAP 6. So you have this kind of increased level, if you like, of details. We have these 3 different models. Of course, more needs to be done on uncertainty quantification, in particular when we move into the climate area and likely climate scenarios. But one of these aspects clearly is also it's hourly data, so you can tailor it and you can really play and access this information at that detail on the right. There's monitoring systems. I don't have much time to go into this. Here are sort of ideas about storylines. So we also do tailored, bespoke simulations where people wanted to know, okay, let's think about a 2K warmer world. What will that particular event that we had in 1990 look like? And so we rerun it for this 2K world, and you get this sort of information so you can compare, if you like, how things change in Paris in 1950, 2019, and 2049. You can look at sort of heat-related access. Here's an example of mortality for Prague and tropical nights for Lisbon. And when you use the reanalysis, ERA 5, ECMW have also produced, of course, a part of Copernicus service, the reanalysis, which is really information about the past. But Destination Earth adds, if you like, these scenarios of the future where you can use and compare them in the same kind of city context, what is in store for you. And of course, then there is the extreme CT with a magnifying glass on extreme events. This is sort of the kind of cost is actually quite cheap to do. So if you have specific events that you expect, you can tailor and sort of, you know, this is of course managed by the kind of weather services that participate in Destination Earth. So it's not the direct, like everyone can run their own digital twin. You know, computing resources are clearly limited for that. But on a leveraged way, there is this capability of on-demand simulations, and it comes also with a detection framework that they have developed, which is really looking at combined information, both from ECMWF as well as other information, in order to trigger and detect potential threats, and then move forward, you know, combining the global information, the regional information, using these models like AROME, Harmony AROME, and ALAROME, and then producing impact results. Impacts, in terms of like quick mention of the Early Warning for All initiative, these are the most important, if you like, impacts that people are worried about in terms of extreme weather events. And so there is, of course, a question that our measures in terms of weather scores are not just based on the root mean square error or the anomaly correlation of how things have changed, like in the hemispheres, like I said, Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere, but really for the specific statistics, when you look at rainfall events and so on, it is not about RMS, it is about did we forecast this particular rainfall event at the right location? Did it happen? Did we forecast that and it didn't happen? So it's a statistical kind of measure. It's a different kind of score. And I'm pleased to say that over the past 10 years, we have seen improvement also in these scores for these kind of measurements. but more can be done, and Destination Earth clearly is one aspect of looking at all these kind of different extreme events. And here is some comparison of how we are managing to improve, if you like, forecasts compared to observations. So challenge 4, quickly, AI, for the last 2 minutes only. Okay, you can realize I'm a physical modeler, but it is clearly a serious competitor on the market. You can see the training that we have conducted is something like 9 million GPU hours. So it's more expensive on the training than the physical 30-year run that I showed you earlier, which was like 1.5 million GPU hours. However, you do it only once, and if you do it like on a kind of lower resolution like they do today, and still be quite effective, it's cheaper. But the really killer is, of course, the inference. The fact that when you do the forecast, once you've done your training, apply the weights is 0.1 GPU hour. It's, it costs nothing, basically. So that's the real killer, if you like. In critical time scenarios, when you need a forecast in 1 minute, it can provide it in 1 minute. And so these AI activities with Destination Earth, but also at ECMWF, have started with an atmospheric component, but now are farming out to land surface, ocean, sea ice, wave, and hydrology. Of course, there are different levels of information, different levels of observation, and so on available. And of course, also then bringing this into the impact sector and fusing this information is a powerful aspect of AI, because you can use it now in uncertainty quantification, in communication, like forecast in a box, as I said. It's really easy to run. You no longer have to shift all this information across the network for somebody to retrieve the information. You just give them the algorithm and the weights, run it yourself, and reproduce your data locally. So therefore, it's another way of transforming the way we transport information to the user. We give them the forecast model, literally. All you need is some initial conditions, of course. You still need to transform those. But then you can produce your model wherever you like. You don't need a network. And of course, finally, enhancing the access to complex information. It's this kind of chatbot idea. Everyone has jumped on large language models and chatbots. And of course, it is about communicating this information with users, where weather and climate is maybe just this part of the information, whereas they are concerned about many other things, where weather and climate just plays a small role. But these kind of tools allow you to bring this information together more easily and ask kind of more user-oriented questions that then in the background get digested and fed into different subsystems like Destination Earth to help, if you like, find the right answer. Help you perhaps to find the right temperature. You know, temperature can be 2-meter temperature, it can be temperature anywhere in the vertical of the atmosphere. It can be like, you know, on your phone or whatever. But so people will just ask, give me the temperature. Well, okay, you know, which temperature? Let's look at your problem. And then the system will find the right, if you like, information for you to move forward. So the outlook, clearly data-driven workflows necessitate a rethinking of the production and delivery of data, especially in serving weather services, impact sector, and policy users. In particular on policy, I think we need to do a lot more still. Rapid learning curve on AI continues. Support member states, of course, also in their tasks to adapting and mitigating climate change impacts. And develop applications for translating weather and climate data into weather and climate information that is actually fit for purpose, meaning a lot more about uncertainty quantification, meaning a lot more about like how sure are you that this happens, you know, do I need to invest this much or do I need to invest this much? It's not about believing in climate change. It is about having the right knowledge to get through it reasonably well. So some of this information, of course, it has many, many authors that participate in Destination Earth and continue to participate in Destination Earth, but it's currently in review, hopefully accepted soon, so then you can read more about what I just said there. And of course, finally, I would like to acknowledge EuroHPC for providing these wonderful computing resources, even if they're sometimes not so easy to use. We have been able to really get something out of it, and I think, you know, I encourage everybody to apply for an allocation on EuroHPC and make use of these wonderful resources in Europe, because in the past we used to run this only in the US, and now we are able to do this at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wedi, for your insightful presentation. Just stay with me. Maybe we have some questions from audience. Someone who is inspired with supercomputers and wants to use some supercomputer? Okay, Emir.
Hi, excellent presentation, I must say. So you mentioned a really excessive amount of resources that you're using, and you said that you're doing regular production runs, plus you enable users to do on-demand calculations. So all of these you run on the Euro HPC resources, or you do have some dedicated resources that where you run for example, these on-demand requests from the users?
Yeah, so the Earth system simulations are run on the Euro HPC supercomputers. They cannot be triggered by a user right now because they are too complex, they are too expensive. We are using for this a strategic allocation that we received and have a promise for the next 2 years to continue to use, which is 5% of the GPU resources, and in fact, perhaps 10% of the CPU resources on the Euro HPC platform that I mentioned. And it will also include Jupyter, where we are actively now working with them as they install the new system to use some of that. Then we have the dedicated infrastructure platforms that have been bought through Destination Earth by ESA and EUMETSAT, which are cloud infrastructures. These cloud infrastructures provide user space for people to run what they sometimes may call a digital twin, but they use, if you like, the infrastructure, the backend infrastructure. So like we have sort of edge services, near data compute services on these data bridges that allow you to retrieve and add and modify, if you like, the data. So those are Destination Earth owned, and they are given to the users. Of course, there's only a certain amount for free, and then you can apply, if you are a European user, for a kind of enhanced access, which allows you to use, to have more resources basically on the system. If you then still don't have enough, you would have to, in addition, buy extra cloud resources, for example, on the OVH, which is an underlying infrastructure, European cloud infrastructure provider.
Okay, so, and when you say users, so this is offered for different research units in Europe? And
yes, anybody, in principle. So it runs through a vetting process that the European Commission has a process of looking who applied. I mean, it's fair to say that it's for Europe.
If you look at the categories of users, so it can come from the research and academia, it can be public administration, like a meteorological service, or, I don't know, individual cities which want to do the simulations that are interesting for them, and it can also be like SMEs and industry, right?
Yes, all of them. It can be all of them. The on-demand services in particular are currently developed with sort of national institutions in mind. So, so if you have a particular case as a national institution and come to us, contact us, and then we can also talk about use cases that are like maybe requiring HPC, Euro HPC type resources. So for example, these on-demand extreme runs, they are already leveraged by a team of kind of European users, but if there was a particular, say, request from a public institution in Croatia, then this obviously can easily be discussed, because Croatia is also part, in fact, of that consortium. So, so yes, so there, through that mechanism, also Euro HPC resources are available. In fact, they are underused, if you like, at the moment, from the 330 contract in particular. I keep pushing them to do more. Whereas the climate user is really, at the moment, absorbing all the resources because they can. And so, yes, there is a facility there. But the cloud resources in particular, in principle, are often to anybody in Europe. And of course, with those data access tools on which you can then build to have your own training application, your own AI application, or so on. Yeah.
And just last question. So you said you are going up to certain resolution. Do you already foresee the amount of resources that you will need for like a next step? And if the AI factories will help you in like getting the models even better, just achieving a higher resolution and so forth? It's like, do you already have a plan for Destination Earth 2.0?
I mean, you always run the next generation model, of course, as well. So on the physical model, I can tell you we can run globally now up to 700 meters, but we don't offer this as a service. And we obviously, the regional models go up to 100 meters in principle. There are some applications like the one that I mentioned with PMAP and PyTorch that can run up to 10 meters. They could run in principle a forecast in the box up to 10 meters, but it obviously needs a bit more development. And then for AI, of course, the big challenge is to train on this very high resolution data. This is what is really happening now in the near term, because we have produced these 30 years of 4 kilometers. This is 4.4 kilometer data, or 5 kilometer data, ocean and atmosphere. And the AI machinery for training on this kind of data is just starting, because so far they have trained on more reanalysis data, which is at 30, 40 kilometer resolution. So it's a huge step for them as well, because it's all this wielding of data to the UHPC and so on, which now needs to incorporate our new tools to be able to access the data and parallelize this at this very high resolution. So training on this very high resolution is a challenge, and not even NVIDIA or anybody else is doing this right now. Well, they also don't have our data, but it's a challenge to train on this very high resolution data, just from a technical perspective as well. So that's the next step, really.
Oh, thank you.
Do we have some more questions? Okay, one more. Here.
Hello. I just want to ask you, do you have data for ocean temperatures?
Yes.
And how old? What's the oldest data?
I mean, this is sort of simulation data, of course. So if you think about observational data,
yes,
then we don't hold observational data in Destination Earth, because it's more about like a simulation service. But we are simulating historical simulations, which started in 1950. And then we have simulations that basically start in the 1990 to go into the future. So it gives you like ocean temperatures of the future. But it's hourly data, and you know, and it's sort of at all vertical levels of the ocean for 2 different ocean models. So that kind of data you can extract. But when you think about observations, then Destination Earth is right now probably not your right address. But you would want to sort of look at the development of ECMWF, for example, for ERA 6, which is a coupled reanalysis, which analyzes ocean and atmospheric data of the past 50 years. And that should start to become available in 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wedi. We appreciate your time, expertise you shared with us. A sada vas sve pozivam na kratku pauzu na kavu u predvorju, nakon čega slijedi predstavljanje zajednice sa poster prezentacijama i krećemo točno u 11:30.